Magandang hapon. Ako si Miriam Grace Go, ang investigative editor ng Rappler. Nanonood kayo ngayon ng Newsbreak Chats. Newsbreak Chats is our huddle with Rappler journalists where we share insights, analysis, even inside stories about the major issues we've tackled in our in-depth reports. In November and December, Rappler came out with two series of investigative reports. The first series was the LASCAñAS Affidavit, Duterte, I Killed for Duterte. The second one was The Case versus Quiboloy, Years of Alleged Sexual Abuse and Fraud Catch Up with Davao Preacher. To enrich the series, we didn't rely just on court documents. Newsbreak spoke to several sources and witnesses who corroborated details, and we cross-checked them with other documents and records. Through this series, we unraveled President Rodrigo Duterte's turf. This is the side of Davao City that, while perhaps known to locals since Duterte was mayor, was unknown to the rest of the country even after he became president. I would say President Duterte's shadow was very much in these stories. Las Cañas says Duterte, as mayor, formed the Davao Death Squad, or DDS, and gave orders to carry out extrajudicial killings. Meanwhile, the alleged sexual abuse and fraud committed by Pastor Apollo Quiboloy and his Kingdom of Jesus Christ apparently went unchecked while he was a close friend of Mayor Duterte and while he was showering him with gifts as expensive as properties and use of private jets. Joining me today are the Rappler editors and the senior reporter who worked on those stories. Managing editor Chaiho Filenya led the team, and Malacanang reporter Pia Ranada was among the reporters who worked on the DDS series. Head of Regions Inday Espina Varona and Mindanao Bureau Coordinator Herbie Gomez were behind the series on Quiboloy's Church. Hello mga ka-hold the line.
Hello, Gigi.
Thank you for joining Newsbreak Chats today. Chai, can you tell us, to the extent that we can reveal, how we got the LASCAñAS affidavit, the one that he submitted to the International Criminal Court, and how we went about putting the series together? You produced more than a dozen stories from in this series.
Okay, siguro it all begins with as early as the Matobato affidavit. If you remember, September 2016 siya yung unang-unang whistleblower who came forward and confirmed na merong Davao Death Squad. And then Las Cañas in October of the same year appeared also before the Senate. So that was the first time we heard and saw Las Cañas. This is Arturo Las Cañas. And then he denied kung ano yung sinabi ni Matobato. So medyo nasira na-weaken yung credibility ni Matobato at that time. But then, in 2017, the following year, Las Cañas appeared before the Senate again. And then he said, inamin niya, that he was ordered to lie the year before. So he became a person of interest since that time. And then he left the country not long after. But because the two men confirmed that there was a Davao Death Squad, and they in fact corroborated each other's stories and accounts. I felt that it was important to continue keeping track of him, even if he had left the country. So, meron kasi silang handlers eh. So, we managed to identify who the handlers were. And in the case of Matobato, we even we interviewed him in a safe house, and the same thing with Las Cañas, so that even when he had left the country, na-establish na yung ties. And then later on, this was 20 October, mga bandang October 2020. But even before that, we were tracking where he was. Ang alam lang was that he was out of the country, but the ties were were sustained, were maintained. So that by October 2020, when we heard about the affidavit, yun na, hindi ko na siya pinakawalan. I said I wanted a copy of the affidavit, and if it was possible to interview him. So an arrangement was made to do a remote interview with him, all the way to this year, when the full 180 plus pages affidavit was finally revealed and shared with us. Hindi ko na lang siguro sasabihin for now how we got hold of the affidavit, but suffice it to say na lang that it was really a continuing effort to maintain the ties with him through the years.
And to make it clear to our audience, the International Criminal Court has already accepted that affidavit, and it's their basis for granting Las Cañas limited immunity, right? So Trianti, he's implicating a lot of prominent people in his affidavit. Siyempre, andun si Pangulong Duterte and the Senators Bongo and Bato de la Rosa and several other people holding cabinet positions now. Saan tayo nahirapan or nagkaroon ng extra challenges para mabuo yung series?
Well, Miss Gigi, it's one reason is also because marami mga personalities na minention sa affidavit ay mahirap na i-track, di ba? Like, we don't know what happened to them. Some of them are completely missing. Like, we don't know what befell them after the events narrated in the affidavit. Maraming mga biktima, yung mga perpetrators themselves, the assassins, and even members of the death squad who were cops and or barangay captains. Very hard to track them and to verify exactly what happened in those incidents mentioned. Isa ring difficulty was the fact that maraming incidents in the affidavit are only witnessed by LASCAñAS. So things like yung incident with Alan C. and others, Michael Yang, yung mga yun, in the account of LASCAñAS, siya lang yung present nung sinabihan siya ng mga claims ng about the president, about Michael Yang. So definitely part of it was how do we verify when it's just him saying this? And we really went all the way to like going back to the CHR 2009 hearings and seeing kung nagmamatch ba at any point yung accounts ng totally distinct hitmen back then and yung mga new claims ni LASCAñAS. So it really involved a lot of going through records, talking to multiple people just to make sure that we weren't just mouthing what LASCAñAS was saying.
At marami tayo na corroborate, so, in reading all the cases and the killings in the affidavit, ano yung kwento or detalye that gave you goosebumps or made you say this is pure evil?
Ako siguro the very first time, because I had a copy of an initial draft, no. Binasa ko yung draft, hindi pa siya yung sinubmit or binigay sa ICC. It was already overwhelming, and then when I got hold of the final submission, what was submitted, nakaka-numb siya eh. Parang page after page after page, all accounts of killings. Na parang, how could these people kill so many people in this manner and given these particular circumstances? Na parang at some point, napagod na ako mentally eh. Na parang, bakit hindi na ako nagugulat? Parang, ganon eh, at some point, yung naging effect sa akin. Na, which was not good na parang hindi ito normal eh. Dapat nagagalit ako, dapat natatakot ako, dapat hindi siya acceptable. Pero yon, numerous accounts. But there was one particular account that stood out, and this is the same account that prompted LASCAñAS to come out.
Yung may bata,
Oo, ito yung kwento ng Patasaha family. meron silang tina-target na isang male na dapat i-assassinate. And then nung hinarang sila, binuksan yung sasakyan, kasama yung buong pamilya niya, including the child and the mother who was pregnant. Pero dinala sila and then orders, patayin lahat, patayin yung buntis na nanay, and then pati yung bata, pinatay. He tried to say, wag na nating isama yung bata. Kaya lang, yung kwento nga was, lalaki yung bata at some point, matatandaan niya yung mga mukha natin and magre-revenge yan. Baka tayo yung balikan. So, mabuti pang patayin na rin yung bata. So, yun yung naging disturbing for him. Parang nagkaroon siya ng nightmares. Hindi niya nag-a-appear yung bata. So, yun yung nakadisturb sa kanyang conscience.
And we should stress that the order to kill the entire family, including the pregnant wife and the 4-year-old child, came from Duterte, who was mayor at that time, related to the Davao Death Squad gunmen. Pia, merong nag-stand out sa'yo na incident?
For me, it's more of the fact na yung affidavit ni LASCAñas mentioned so many familiar names na alam mo yun, nakasalamuha ko before on a daily basis when we were covering physically, right, yung mga government offices, parang you would see these names, si Senator Bongo, si Ronald De La Rosa, and parang for you to hear that they could have possibly been behind these murders, these cold-blooded murders, parang it makes your skin crawl lang na wow, parang they seem, normal, right? Like, we talk to them, they make conversations, parang normal everyday interactions. But, so it just makes you think na that people really are capable of these things and capable of living a public life. Na we see them as leaders, supposedly like public servants, but they could very well have been leading a totally different past. And nakakatakot lang yun to think how much, like different faces can be, how different a public face can be to a private face. Tsaka siguro in general lang din na reading the affidavit, parang it read like an account of parang drug cartel, yung sa Mexico, yung patayan here, patayan there, and dali-dali lang to order the death of someone. And to think that this was happening in our own country, right? Even under the guise of public service. Kasi if you read the accounts of yung mga hitmen, they felt, especially nung early years of the Davao Death Squad, that they were doing the public a service. They were actually parang doing this for the greater good. Yung the way na na-brainwash sila into thinking na, di ba, ang pangalan nga nila kay Duterte, Superman. And they were justifying cold-blood murder by saying that they were doing this to protect their families, to protect Davaoenos. And it just gives me goosebumps to think that someone could be brainwashed in this way to do those kinds of deeds.
Actually, hindi nga siya like a past life for them, di ba? Based on LASCAñas affidavit, even nung presidente na si Duterte at special assistant na niya si Bongo sa Malacanang, pinatawag pa, at PNP chief si Bato de la Rosa, no? Pinatawag pa siya because meron pang kill order, kumbaga, na-transport yung Davao Death Squad operations dito sa Metro Manila. Can you recall that, Chay?
Which one, Jean?
Yung pinatawag si LASCAñas early during Duterte's term as president kasi may pa-project pa supposedly si Bongo sa kanya na ipapa-assassinate.
Ito ba yung isang involving one senator at the
Yeah.
time?
Yes.
Yes. I think hindi na namin naisama yon sa kadami-daming stories that we published. But yeah, supposedly si Senator Trillanes na dapat i-ambush siya, yung sasakyan niya dapat babanggain ng isang truck, and supposedly yun yung magiging cause nung death niya, pero hindi natuloy yon. So it's parang yun na nga, as you said, no, parang in-export yung methodology from Davao to Manila. Tapos kung titingnan natin yung EJ case, yung kasagsagan ng drug war. nag-export din sila ng mga police na nasa Davao and brought to assigned to police stations here to execute the killings. Pareho yung paraan ng pagpatay, yung sa ulo, tinatamaan, parang sure na death, tapos riding in tandem, yung tumitira rin. So it's the same pattern, whether it was in Davao or dito sa Maynila.
Yung mga veteranong journalist dito sa ating guests, I won't say kasi yung matatanda, the veterans, may na-investigate na ba kayo or nabasa na investigative reports before na same level ng pagiging news karumal-dumal as what the accounts of the Davao death squad killings were? Meron?
Wala actually, wala, Gigi, because in many cases, even investigative, you can have 1, 2, 3 criminals working together, but this was an entire system, preying on an entire city, at least at that time when Duterte was president. So mukhang ibang level siya talaga.
Totoo. Try ang spin ng supporters ni Pangulong Duterte ay lumang issue na daw ang Davao killings and we're just trying to revive it. And of course, we beg to disagree. Ano yung mga bagong na-uncover natin after, getting access to LASCAñAS affidavit and talking to a lot of other witnesses?
Actually, I think the biggest contribution of our series is that corroboration. There were accounts before, sabi nga ni Pia earlier, meron ng report ang CHR. And then, nung panahon ni Laila de Lima, there was an investigation in Davao dun sa isang burial ground. Tapos isang tabi na yon, nothing really happened there. Tapos at doon na-implicate nga si Duterte and the Davao Death Squad. And I think this is exactly the reason why binalikan si Laila de Lima at ngayon siya ay nakakulong. Bukod doon, remember the Asherto report. Si Asherto was anti-narcotics agent. Intel siya, no? And then meron siyang sinusubaybayan. And then doon sa kanyang intel report, may mga detalye rin doon. Nabanggit si Michael Yang, and dito rin sa LASCAñAS affidavit, hindi magkakilala si Asherto at saka si LASCAñAS. They never met before. Pero yung accounts nila nagtutugma. And then yung drug raid na ginanap sa Davao City, which is very, very high profile, merong account din doon si Asherto. Meron ding account si LASCAñAS, and nagtutugma yung major. Siguro sa ibang detalye hindi eksaktong match 100%. Pero in general pareho yung kwento. So hindi lang iisang tao ang nagsasabi, hindi lang iisang whistleblower, but they're saying the same thing. So if I were the ICC and I am confronted with these details, these documents, these reports, this whistleblower, parang ang feeling ko, I have a case against Duterte.
Which leads me to my next question. No, gaano kabigat yung testimony ni LASCAñAS para dun sa investigation na ginagawa ng International Criminal Court? Definitely, this will haunt Duterte even after he steps down in 2022.
Tinanggap na siya as a sort of a witness, pero hindi pa malinaw in terms of the ICC process itself, no? Kung nakuna na ba siya ng deposition, whether pasok na ba siya sa witness protection program, hindi malinaw yon. So yung partial, yung immunity that was granted to him, that applies only doon sa ICC mismo, that he cannot He cannot say something that will that will be self-incriminating. Pero dito sa Pilipinas, walang ganon eh. Kunyari mahanap siya and then madala siya dito, pwede siyang kasuhan dito. So the only protection that he can get is if he is parang included dun sa witness protection
Witness
program.
protection.
Oo, pero hindi nga natin alam kung ano na yung eksaktong case. And we know na matagal na proseso ang ICC.
Something Lascañas said struck me, no, na he had blind loyalty to Duterte. That's why ginawa niya lahat yung inuutos na pagpatay. And then blind loyalty or obedience was also the reason cited by former members of the Quiboloy's quote-unquote kingdom, why it took them years before they could break free from the abuses in the organization. So I'd like to ask Inday or Herbie, how did we stumble upon this story that turned into a series? And then how did we find the former members na nag-reveal ng mga detalye na ganito?
Lady first.
No, I think, but it was Herbie. Let's give credit. Herbie, you were the one who found these women. So, kwento mo nga sa amin.
Sige, ganito. Ako, I've always had a fascination with the cult-like groups. Ano. And then, of course, si Pastor Quiboloy has been very visible sa internet. May mga pronouncements siya na talagang fabulous. So, medyo na-curious rin ako. And then lumabas nga yung story about his arrest and brief detention in Hawaii in
Hawaii.
2018. Oo. Ano yun? Wala lang. Hindi nga ako sumausaw doon sa story. But then, recently, ito nga, yung indictment niya sa California. So medyo na-curious na ako. So I started doing some readings. And someone, hindi ko na babanggitin kung sino, sent me an unsigned letter. Napakataas, binasa ko. And then, medyo na-shock ako. And then, I got hold of documents from yung indictment documents. So binasa ko na, pinag-aralan ko. What I found was really disturbing. So sabi ko, I'll do a story. There was no plan to do an investigative story, at the beginning. Pero, yung information just kept on coming. So I started searching for kung sinong pwede kong kontakin sa social media, sino yung mga bokal. And I realized na all these allegations were already on social media maybe years ago.
Okay.
Hindi ito bago. Nasa social media, walang pumapansin. Walang pumapansin sa mga accusers ni Quiboloy. And hindi na sila takot. Nandun yung mga pangalan nila. So I started sending emails, messages, until someone responded. And then I called her up. And we talked for about an hour, 53 minutes or about an hour. Na-shock ako sa mga revelations niya, no? And everything that she said corroborated what's in the
Indictment document.
very consistent with the indictment papers. So doon nag-umpisa. And then, sabi ko, I floated the idea to her na, would you willing to be interviewed by Rappler sa Zoom or sa StreamYard? And she agreed. And then we set it, and then in production na. And then by the time na schedule na yung interview, 2 others came and said they wanted to join. Sabi ko, good. The more the merrier. So doon nag-umpisa.
So yung naririnig na natin yung cases ng fraud. Sabi mo nasa social media na, tapos yung ang binanggit mo nahuli na sa Hawaii na-detain for a time si Quiboloy. Pero ano yung extent ng pag-aabuso that you realized while working on the story? Parang give our audience an idea of the kinds of abuses that the victims suffered.
Oo, Gigi, kasi ano eh, I didn't expect, nasanay na tayo sa fraud, sa abuse. Every day na nababasa natin, naririnig natin, napapanood natin sa TV, that somehow we get numb. Akala parang naging normal na lang sa atin yung mga ganong klaseng usapan. Nung pumutok yung 2018 sa Hawaii, ano lang yon, money laundering, currency smuggling. So parang hindi na, but yun nga, the devil is in the details. When I started seeing the details, doon na medyo, uy, ibang klase to. Hindi to ordinary abuse. And then yung details would suggest ano siya eh, debauchery. And torture, it's frat like na mga allegations, no, against the group of hindi lang sa group, against the pastor himself. So medyo ibang klase talaga.
That he supposedly has spiritual wives, di ba?
Oo,
minors
although
pa.
yung spiritual wives, although it came as a surprise to me na allegedly pinapractice yan sa Kingdom of Jesus Christ. But it's not, hindi original si Quiboloy yan. I did a story many years back about smaller cults in Mindanao. There was one here in Misamis Oriental, in the town of Hasaan. The leader of that group had spiritual wives. In fact, the story is he was telling the ladies, don't make sure that you don't that you leave your doors open, because the Holy Spirit might enter around midnight. So something like that. So hindi, the Quiboloy group is not an original when it comes to spiritual lives.
And you spoke with the former members, all of them female.
Yes.
What did you feel when they were sharing to you the details of their ordeal? Ano yung common experience nila, and bakit sila nagtagal ng ganon, hindi agad nakawala?
Alam mo, Gigi, I've been covering battered women, abused women, both in domestic and other situations for what, decades na siguro. But I've never been stumped like I was when faced with these three women. We've read the details of the U.S. Indictment from news reports, di ba? So we know it's harrowing, a lot of details there, even if it's secondhand from prosecutors. Pero and none of the women we interviewed, by the way, ever said that he was sexually abused. I think yung greatest gift na binigay nila sa mga taong gustong umunawa kung bakit nangyayari ito is because their narratives allowed us to understand exactly why and how things went on for so long without being stopped. No? So it's very sad that I've heard some people attacking them, asking them, like, why did you allow the abuse? Why did you work that hard when you were kids? Why are you speaking just up now? It's never easy. Eh? Even for abused women, even if they seem strong, it's never easy. How much more these three when they were trapped as children, 13, 15, grade 3.
At saka yung element ng the entire families are members of the organization. So parang paniniwalaan ka ba ng pamilya mo, or they are being ostracized if they would make these allegations, di ba?
Tama ka, Gigi, kasi si Renita had the brother stand up and denounce her. And I think there's another member doing that, no? Most abused women that I've covered, they deal with a single person, maybe 2 or 3. Yung sa Kingdom, this was an entire infrastructure of abuse. Eh. Parang every level, from the ministers downwards, parang we're maximized para mag-squeeze ng anything they could from members, and two, to instill fear so that everyone, they could keep everyone in line. And lahat naman ng tao, sinasabihang special tayo. So we should act as one against those who threaten this exclusive enclave of the children of God, whatever they call themselves.
Mm-mm. Can you share with us? You spoke also with Jail Cornelio, a Rappler columnist. He's a sociologist specializing in religious issues. Can you tell us how Jail explained yung trauma sa ka-experience noong interviewees mo?
Sabi niya, it's like what Herbie said, the stricter a church is, the more its members are held in thrall. Kasi kung ang hirap pumasok in the first place, I think the three women told us, let's say if you had lapsed and you wanted to go back, you had to pay a big amount, you had to prove yourself, you had to have all disciplinary actions. So sabi ni Professor Cornelio, the strict the more difficult it is to become an accepted member, and then the more difficult it is to maintain good standing in the church, ay usually mas mahirap ding lumabas. Whether it's because of fear, at sabi ni, and they all say na they would hold you if you attempted. Renita had to climb the wall to escape, no? Or you got so used to sacrificing your will. Yun ang sabi ni Jail eh. That is the most common thread there is. You were made to believe that sacrificing your will is the only way you can become a a worthy follower. So yan ang nangyayari. So the abuse goes on and on and on.
And ito nga in-interview mo, even if they've gone abroad, di ba? Or supposedly tumakas na sila from the abuses, they kept sending money, di ba? Hindi pa rin total yung break from the organization.
At hinabol rin sila ni Quiboloy. Si Arlene Stone, Herbie, di ba? Hinabol ni Quiboloy. She was wooed back to the church.
You do agree that, ay sige, Herbie.
I think hindi kasi hindi ganun lang na membership. Ayoko na maging member, alis na. Hindi. These women, these victims, yung emotions nila, may investment sila dun sa grupo. Spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, attached na sila eh. So it's not a matter of ayoko na magbayad ng membership fee, alis na ako. Hindi ganun. Hindi to Rotary, hindi to JC, hindi to... You cannot just...
Parang naging second family, no? Second family.
Faith, ito, faith. Religion ito, no? Although hindi siya institutionalized the way Catholics are, pero religion ito. So merong guilt. In order for a man to make an unwilling victim, perform X-rated stuff, and then call it holy, you need religion. Di ba? Oo. To justify something, the most intelligent person in the world will say the most stupid and will do the most the grossest action, guilt-free, under the cover of religion.
You do agree, Herbie, Inday, that Quiboloy's abuses may have gone unchecked because of his friendship with then Mayor Duterte?
Yes, I think they sort of occupy that same trajectory na nobody had ever actually gone up against them, or those who were brutally punished and immediately taken out of the way, in the case of both of Quiboloy. And here's where I say that Davao, there's a big media community, and yet it takes, para lumabas ang ganitong mga katotohanan, it takes a community that is willing to um, that is willing to be on the offending end, dun sa mga leaders nila. And both the Davao City community at that time and certainly Quiboloy's church, gano'n na gano'n eh. Walang magtatayo talaga at magsasalita. And so, nare-reinforce. And ito yung sabi ni Jail din actually, and even Jail actually said, may mga parallelisms dyan eh. Because the more leaders are allowed to get away with it, the more they build the trappings that will allow them to tell the world that what am I doing is for your good. At tuloy-tuloy, dalawa sila parehong-pareho, yun ang sinasabi ni Quiboloy, di ba? Kaya ko ginagawa nito, sabi ni Arlene, these children were told to drop out of school. Dahil ang sabi, kung gagawin mo yan, that is the only way you can save your family if you work for me. So, si Duterte rin, di ba? You need to accept this because this is the way I will save your children.
Totoo.
Saka
Pia, you wrote...
na-embolden. He was actually emboldened by his association
with Duterte.
Hindi naman, I wouldn't go far as to saying na may direct relation you mean yung abuses were sanctioned by
walang relasyon.
hindi naman ganon, pero yung ties niya with Duterte actually emboldened him. Okay? Every time Duterte visits the church, visits him, members see it. At the time, mayor pa si Duterte. Mayor, binibisita yung kaso. It gave Quiboloy legitimacy. When Gloria Arroyo went to Quiboloy,
yes.
Nabigyan ng, presidente to, binibisita yung appointed son of God natin. So, in the eyes of the members, na medyo na solidify, na fortify yung belief na oo nga, totoo nga.
Or mas mag-hesitate sila, no?
Oo. Diba?
Mag-hesitate to come out if there are victims of abuse. Pia, you wrote about early in Duterte's presidency. Can you give us, our followers, an idea how close Duterte is to Quiboloy?
Okay, so si Duterte mismo inamin niya na he received 3 properties from Quiboloy and some of these were given to his children. May isang lot in Woodridge Park which is in Maa, Davao City. Meron din isa sa Royal Pines sa Matina, Davao City. May sinabi si Duterte rin na Quiboloy gave him a Nissan Safari, a Ford Expedition which Duterte was claimed by Sara Duterte and nagwala daw si Sara nung tinangkang i-return sa uli ni Duterte yung Ford Expedition. And I remember very distinctly because I was abroad that biglang nag-statement si Sara Duterte like years
3 years later. 3 years later.
He published the story about Duterte claiming the Ford Expedition gift. Talagang sinabi ni Sara na, it never happened. Never ako nagwala for that Ford Expedition. I never even saw that Ford Expedition that Quiboloy supposedly gave to Duterte. Things like that. And then Duterte even said na si Quiboloy tried to arrange an appointment for Duterte with like a very famous neurosurgeon in the United States para daw sa kanyang sweaty hands to like fix his sweaty palms or something. And then we also recall na noong 2016 campaign, pinapahiram ni Quiboloy kay Duterte yung private jet niya for the campaign sorties. But apart from that, Duterte always goes to yung Quiboloy's compound. Alam ko parang they're like shooting buddies. They do lots of activities together. And si Duterte kasi parang very, very susceptible si Duterte to flattery. And when you hear Pastor Quiboloy, diba, saying that he had a dream that Duterte would become president, isn't that the ultimate source of flattery na parang the appointed son of God says you will be the leader of this country one day. So talagang si Quiboloy knows the sweet spot of Duterte. Alam talaga niya yung soft spot ni Duterte. It's really flattery and, like bolstering that sense of Messiah na parang, I know it's destiny that I become the president of the Philippines. So I think that their egos, kind of boost each other up.
Other,
A cycle of parang narcissism going on. And these two, parang both of them use their charisma to devastating effect. Alam natin na si Quiboloy, diba, parang the charisma of a religious cult leader. But si Duterte himself also is a leader of a cult in a way, diba? The cult of his personality. Na a lot of his
True.
supporters tend to see him na parang they justify their bending of their own values to support Duterte na, oy, kahit na sabihin niya, burial of Marcos as a hero, okay lang, di ba? Kahit even if before, if any other leader would have said that, they probably would have said no. Or things like, parang brushing aside yung mga claims that he ordered assassinations of innocent people, things like that. So for me talagang maybe they learn from the same, they're getting from the same strategy of bolstering their personas and their narratives.
Palaging tanong ito sa investigative journalists like you. So now what? Will your report make a difference? And what, parang expose lang tayo ng expose pero wala naman daw mababago, walang mangyayari. So I'd like to ask, what do you hope will happen after all the revelations in your series? Both series, Lascañas and Quiboloy.
Lascañas muna.
Kahit sino, I mean...
Hindi, sige. Siguro, two things. Number one is, ang takeaway ko, it takes one. Tapos, sana sunod-sunod yung lumabas and sunod-sunod yung mag-shine ng light dun sa areas, dun sa issues na previously blanco tayo, na we never knew, we never imagined, hindi natin alam. And that even applies to the kingdom of Quiboloy, di ba? So ganun din, kung walang whistleblowers na si Matobato and then si Lascañas, and we don't know if there will be more who were members of the Davao Death Squad na lalabas pa, hindi natin alam yun. So sana, dahil mas maraming lalabas, mas may corroboration, at mas maniniwala ang tao na, uy, hindi ito gawa-gawa ng isang tao lang, hindi lang dalawa, kasi ang dami nila eh. How can it be fabricated? How can it be wrong if so many people are saying the exact same thing? So kung kumbaga, di ba sabi nga, it takes a village. And when you have that, sana merong indignation, and from that indignation, a demand for accountability na dapat merong managot sa mga pagkakamaling ito, sa mga hindi dapat na naganap, and may action, di ba? Yun lagi yung inaasahan ng reporters. Of course, sabihin, kasi yun naman yung limitation natin eh. We can expose, we can do the research, we can talk to so many people, but we can't lead the action eh. Parang sana merong mamuno doon. We just add the basis for it.
Yung magsasampa ng kaso, no? Things like that. Oh, Inday, Pia, Herbie.
It's just that, sinabi ni Chay na, at sinabi rin ito ng mga tatlong, the three women that we interviewed, that we hope that giving voice to them and allowing them na tahain yung mga istorya nila will give other people who may be still trapped there or maybe out there but remain silent, the courage to speak out one after the other. Kasi iba talaga yung impact pag nakita, here are all the people that Quiboloy abused. And kanina nga lang there are letters coming in from, strangely, even Latin America, no? Iba-ibang mga so we hope that we can continue this series. Pero also, I don't know if Herbie agrees, but I hope that the politicians who have always paid homage to the self-proclaimed appointed son of God will think twice now before going there and
Asking for endorsement.
And asking for his endorsement.
Sa akin, your question is, what's next? Journalist ako eh. Di naman ako prophet. So, Unlike
What do you hope will happen?
Pastor Quiboloy, who claims to be the Savior, the Messiah. Wala ko. I don't I don't entertain the na I can save the world. It's beyond the power. It's beyond the territory of the journalist to say that. I can wish. But yun nga, sabi nga, according to one wise man, sabi nga, prophesying is lying professionally. So I do not know what happens next. No, my hope, and as Pia revealed, documented naman to, the president himself said binigyan siya ng he was gifted with cars, with real estate by Pastor
Quiboloy.
Quiboloy. Now, can I hope the president will feel some guilt. These are things, these are gifts bought using the money raised by a lot of carolers, uh, many of them minors throughout the world, who did that in the name of service to God. They thought they were doing God a service. They didn't know this would go to the president as gifts or to Pastor Quiboloy. This was supposedly for their ministry, for charity. So I think any decent man would return that. It doesn't belong. It belongs to the people who raised that money.
Well, one way we can find out kung sinauli niya is pakita niya yung salin niya, di ba? Kasi sabi ni Pia, reflected sa dating sa mga lumang salin yung properties eh. Pia, what do you hope the series would achieve?
Yung sa LASCAñAS, I'm hoping na when politicians read the series, they will understand that the center cannot hold all the time. Kasi I think Duterte naman never expected to be president of the Philippines, diba? So, alam mo yun, parang if you're a politician now and parang iniisip mo, oh, baka I can get away with this, you have to think twice. Kasi, alam mo si Arturo LASCAñAS, if you look back at the 2009 CHR hearings, he was there and he was denying, everything. He was saying innocent si Duterte. And, like, decades later, here you are, di ba? Parang because of the kind of attention that Duterte is getting, kasi nga presidente na siya, hindi na niya ma-stomach yung guilt and lumabas siya. So, I'm hoping na pag yung mga politicians understand and realize na hindi dapat nila i-attempt yung ganun. Kasi kahit anumang cover-up gawin mo, can you really cover something like that up for decades, knowing where you want your career to go? And secondly naman, dun sa ating series on the Quiboloy abuses, alleged abuses, I'm hoping that this will also dent the narrative of Duterte that he is a protector of the weak. Because yung kanyang mismong, di ba, close friend and parang ally was the one abusing people. So, di ba, kung by reference, di ba, kung hindi niya alam na nangyayari yun talaga, di ba, parang you'll really question sa dami-dami ng kanyang intelligence. Mayor siya ng Davao for decades, hindi niya naamoy na may ganyang nangyayari. And, Duterte even professes to yung pinaka group of people who he vows to protect are the women, the children, and who were the main victims of Quiboloy, diba? All the witnesses are mostly women and children, like minors. So sana, parang people can open their eyes and call into question their belief that Duterte, is like the protector of the weak, because, that's not a completely solid claim to make, as we can see.
True. This question has been bugging me kasi pwedeng ibalik ng publiko sa atin na nasa media. Had the media been remiss about exposing all this when it mattered? Specifically in 2015, 2016 when Duterte was campaigning to become president. Parang if this were revealed kasi before, this could have stripped Duterte of the meat eh. Or may nabago ba sa context noon at ngayon that we can already report about things like this now?
Sa akin, we have to remember na strong man si Duterte as mayor. Talagang kinakatakutan siya sa Davao kasi pumapatay. Nag-order na pumatay. And sa community press kasi, sa community media, napaka-close-knit community yun eh. Si June Pala, pinatay. So many other journalists have been killed. So I think yung mga nasa Maynila, yung mga medyo malayo from Davao, meron tayong ganong luxury to expose and to talk to people who know about these things. Pero yung mga nandoon in the heart of Davao, kahit na siguro alam nila, hindi nila maisulat or maisiwalat in the same way that we have done. Ang wish ko lang sana nung 2015, 2016, dahil alam nila, sana naibulong sa atin para we could have written about and reported about Duterte with that perspective. Kasi I remember, and medyo kasalanan din siguro natin dito sa reporter sa
Sa
Manila media, ano siya eh, para siyang novelty. What you see is what you get, medyo refreshing, different from the usual politicians na nakikita natin dito sa Maynila. So, medyo na romanticize siguro to a certain extent, which was wrong kasi we were missing a certain perspective which probably yung local media would have been in a better position to share. So, yun lang yung nanghihinayang ako.
Siguro, Gigi, it's infrastructures of powers din eh. Ang sabi nga ni Gail, kung hindi umaksyon, kung hindi nagkakaso sa US, hindi ganon kalaki yung attention kay Quiboloy. Ano? Dahil una, sinabi na ni Chai, nag-attempt, it's not like some members hadn't attempted to expose what's been happening there. Pero mabilis ma-crash yung nangyayari kasi brutal din sila rumesbak eh, di ba? They file cases against people. I mean, even in the US, they've done that. So kaya siguro mahirap mas-sustain. Merong tinatawag sa mga iba't ibang cases na tipping point eh. One case, two case, and then suddenly there's something that will make more people act together. And we don't know if it's going to work permanently with 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 the pastor from Davao, but hopefully it could make a dent nga in his power.
Sa akin naman, nung 2016, we were doing other stories. Ano. Had I known about this in 2016, I would have written about this 5 years ago or 6 years, almost 6 years ago. Pero hindi. May mga limitations din naman ng media. Hindi naman lahat ng bagay sa mundo mako-cover natin kagad. Like this Quiboloy story, it took some time para ma-forma yung storya. Hindi siya ganun kadali actually.
Para sa akin naman, nung 2015, 2016, I was tailing Duterte, we were writing about, syempre yung mga claims of killings, we were talking to the NGOs who were monitoring yung EJ case before, lalo na yung mga among minors. And I guess nung time na yun, it just seemed like parang everyone was saying this is old news, this is nothing new. Parang, and Duterte himself was making claims na, oh, I killed like 10,000 people, I feed their bodies to the fish in Manila Bay, etc. So, I guess, for national media, parang sobrang limited lang yung interest in a story about Davao EJ case because nga, Duterte appeared to be like admitting it naman, and to be honest, diba, lots of people, there are two kinds of people eh. There are people who know that they're Davao killings and don't really care, and then there are people who don't believe that Duterte really, called the shots there. So, alam mo yun, parang at that time, even if no matter how much we try to dig and interview witnesses and NGOs, sobrang limited lang ng information that they were willing to share. And I think it really took parang a hitman, someone who was in the circle of Duterte, to actually give new information that, we could build on. But at that time, you really couldn't find them. They were, as I said, di ba si LASCAñAS, he was still denying all the way to 2016 na may Davao death squads. And it took a series of events, his own guilt, para lumabas siya in 2017. So, parang media cannot just do it on its own. We can hindi tayo pwedeng humakot ng information out of nowhere. We need a source. We need primary sources to help us tell the story. That's why I really think that the job of exposing these things is a job of the community. And
True.
the media, kung nandun yung media, dapat yung job talaga natin is to pounce on that.
G, if I can add lang, parang I remember one of the challenges din talaga dito sa, at least for the LASCAñAS series, no? Parang, kasi documented, madaming papel, pero because of the pandemic, siguro yung restriction is, sandali, kulang tayo ng interview. Wala tayong nakausap na taga Davao. Parang walang human sources. So parang towards the end of the effort, no, parang nasulat na yung drafts, and then there was that realization na sandali, we have to talk to people, and they have to confirm itong mga nandito sa share to report, andito sa affidavit. So we tried to do that. May mga mga NGOs na kinausap din, people working with sa human rights na groups. Pero alam mo, ngayon na to this is towards the tail end of the Duterte presidency, but talking to them, damang-dama ko pa rin yung takot nila.
Fear.
And parang sinabi nila, minority kami dito sa Davao. Yung karamihan pa rin ng nandito are really still supportive of him. Kaya it's not as easy for them to speak out and to go out and tell the media everything that they know. So parang hush-hush pa rin. So if you will notice kahit sa mga storya, wala talaga tayong napangalan ng ibang tao. Pero yun lang, sinabi lang natin na confirmed by somebody who is based in Davao. Ganon ka lakas yung hawak ni Duterte still at present.
True. Ang nakita ko lang value ng mga serye natin na recent, no, is that yung staying with the story, yung keeping your interest in these issues. Kasi nga halimbawa, nung sinasabi natin, 2015, 2016, okay, we've heard about this, pero we could only parang dig into them up to a certain extent. Pero the fact na naging relevant siya ulit ngayon, yung not hesitating to take up, no, may malaking value yun. I guess yung last question ko is, anong lessons natin about, kung paano nag-elect ng local strongman na naging presidente, and then yung isang religious organization that could influence the members to the extent na, I don't know, iboboto nila kung sino, or isusuportahan nila kung sino yung idinidikta sa kanila. Anong lessons nakuha natin dito going into 2022, because we have candidates now na local officials. We have candidates now being endorsed by the man in the middle of this investigative series, Duterte.
I guess it's the realization na even if Duterte seemed to be parang what you see is what you get person, it turned out he's the opposite. Ang daming smokes and mirrors, ang daming parang claims na ang dami palang holes in those claims. So I guess the lesson for everyone is to always just have a healthy critical view na second guessing everything that these leaders say, and always looking at their track record. Because I think madaling ma-hypnotize ng parang remarks that they say, mga sensational headlines they put out, promises they make, mga gimmicks nila on the campaign trail. It's so easy to be distracted by that, but we should never let go of the fact that more than their words now, it's what their actions in the past that we must judge them by, and it's really the job of journalists to uncover that and to explain that to the public, so that the public can really make an informed decision about who they will vote for in May 2022.
Ang hirap ng tanong ni Gigi, sa totoo lang. Pagdating sa election, I think it's just that both in the case of Duterte and in Quiboloy, was they tapped into the desires, or they tapped also into the desperation of people. And it doesn't mean yung talagang poor lang, no? Yung takot sa krimen, takot sa um, people who are sad, people who are it's easy to manipulate the desolation when people feel desolate and despair. Kaya siguro and they like, then they go for more dramatic expressions of salvation, which the two men are very, very good at giving. Siguro, awan ko, ang takeaway ko lang is sometimes plodding and deliberate can be better than yung pangakong bigla-biglaan. And if you remember, yung pangako nila, eventually somewhere along the way, ang sinasabi nila sa kanilang followers is, kailangan yung dagdagan pa yung impyerno ng pinanggalingan nyo para mas safe ko kayo. So parang umikot lang talaga ang problema, kasi eventually it would become, you need to accept this so that eventually we will find salvation. Wala rin pagbabago.
Yung sa akin, ang takeaway ko, napaka-potent mix or combination ang politics, religion, and power. Pagka walang nakabantay dyan, it's so easy for a strong man like Duterte to manipulate, and even an influential and pareho silang charismatic. Duterte and Quiboloy, both charismatic men. Very, very easy for them to manipulate their followers, lead them to believe na yung vision nila is for the good of the community. It will bring them salvation, give them a better life, save the community from crime. Mga ganong lines. And I guess as journalists, parang yung advantage natin is we're watching from a distance, and we can see the patterns, and this is where pumapasok yung sinabi rin ni Pia kanina. We all need a degree of healthy skepticism kasi dapat talaga hindi lahat paniniwalaan. And in the end, yung trabaho ng media as check and balance, napakahalaga, especially in the lead up to 2022, in the 2022 elections. We're always criticized for being negative, for criticizing our leaders. Trabaho yun eh. Kung hindi natin gagawin yung trabaho natin, hindi malalaman ng ordinaryong tao na ito pala ang abuses na ginagawa ng Pangulo o ng head ng kultong ito. So, trabaho lang talaga on the part of the media.
Saka na-notice niyo yung did you notice the striking similarities kay Duterte at saka alam mo, both of them, the two of them, yung tinatawag na cult of personality applies to both of them. Both are authoritarian. Si Duterte, authoritarian sa gobyerno. Si Quiboloy, authoritarian sa kanyang mga followers. And both of them, the two of them, are being seen by their followers, by a lot of people, as Messiah, Savior. Si Duterte, Savior of the Philippines. Si Quiboloy, savior ng followers niya. So, I think dapat magbantay tayo dito sa tinatawag na cult of personality. Yung ang in next year's election, pumili tayo ng isang leader o leaders, kasi hindi pwedeng isa lang eh. There's no such thing as yung presidente lang ang Messiah.
Fix everything, no?
Ano ito eh? It has to be the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary working together. Hindi pwede nasa isang tao. Hindi yan Diyos. Okay? Si President Duterte is not God. He cannot save. And as we have seen now, hindi niya na-solve ang maraming problema. Bakit? Kasi hindi siya Diyos eh. It takes society or the three branches of government to cooperate, to collaborate in order to get things done. So yun po, ilagay natin sa isip natin when we choose our leaders next year. Hindi yung pati sa Senate, kung sino-sinong ilalagay natin dyan, dapat yung marunong, hindi pwedeng yung senator o yung congressman, mas matalino yung ordinary one. Hindi, dapat medyo may standard, higher standard yung mga pinipili natin. Hindi just because popular siya o he looks good, magandang lalaki o maganda, artista. Hindi ganun. And that is not to say na pag-artista hindi pwede, no? Ibig sabihin, let's scrutinize. Tingnan natin yung qualifications kung qualified ba talaga.
Thank you. Very wise reminders, hindi lang sa sarili natin as media practitioners, but siguro doon sa voters and then sa communities where they are. Kasi sama-sama tayong pipili. Thank you, Chai, Tia, Inday, and Herbie for joining Newsbreak Chats today.
Thank you.
To those who are watching, if you want more of our explainers, in-depth reports, investigations, podcasts, and video specials about these issues, you can visit and bookmark our Newsbreak section at rappler.com/newsbreak. And if you want to be part of a group that's given exclusive content by our journalists and experts in various fields and sectors, you can join Rappler Plus. Rappler Plus is a community of Rappler supporters who engage in smart and constructive discourse with our journalists. And if you have leads for investigative stories, you can email us at feedback@rappler.com, or you can send us messages via Messenger on Newsbreak's Facebook account. Kung tutuusin, bago pa man ihalal ng mga tao na maging presidente ang noon ay mayor ng Davao na si Rodrigo Duterte, may mga sumisingaw na tungkol sa mga pagpatay sa Davao. Nakita nating ginawa rin ito sa buong bansa sa ngalan ng kanyang drug war. At kung tutuusin, may pahiwatig na sa atin ng mga pang-aabuso at pagmamalabis ng isang relihiyosong organisasyon na may proteksyon ng alkalde ng Davao. Pero marami pa rin ang nagsangtabi ng babala at marami pa rin ang bumoto batay sa maling akala. Sa susunod na halalan, samahan niyo kami para sa mas masusing pagtingin sa mga nais umupo sa Malacanang, sa Kongreso, sa Kapitolyo, sa City Hall. Matuto na tayo. Ako si Miriam Grace Go, tumuto kayo sa Newsbreak Chats. See you again in January.